Is this good?
It's good.
Perfect. So, like you said, I'm Emily. I had the privilege of being with Metal and Rebecca both in Cape Town at UCT. I'll kind of start by introducing a little bit about myself and how I got into advocacy. So you can tell by my accent, I'm American originally. I was born in California, raised in Tennessee, and so I know a lot about the southern things that were going on here. And I made Aliyah with my family when I was 14. We made Aliyah to the Jerusalem area. And like everyone that makes Aliyah, we go to school. Eventually finished school, went to the Army, I served in intelligence. And it was after my military service when I started working abroad, actually back into the States. I traveled to Denver for about a year. And it was the experience there that made me realize we have a huge problem. For me to work amongst the nicest of people and still have them say, well, you're actually a murderer, was kind of shocking to me. To think that they could know me, work with me, and still assume these things that they hear on the news are absolutely true. And that no matter what I say, it's not going to change their views, because CNN says so. It continued when I got back, actually, and I started studying at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I'm a senior now, studying foreign affairs and studies of Islam in the Middle East. And I chose to study that because I decided I need to know more. I need to know more about who it is that's in this region, other than me and my fellow Israelis. And it was 3 challenging years at such a liberal university, I'll just put it that way. But throughout my university, I also had the privilege of working in various government organizations and non-government organizations. I did the Stand With Us Fellowship, my 2nd year. And after doing the fellowship, I volunteered to speak for them. Eventually, that's what led me to Cape Town. I speak for them at the university. And I spoke for them to various student groups from around the world, particularly from Europe and the Scandinavian region. And then to have it come to your front door in Israel, students coming in and saying, well, we just spent 9 days in what they define the West Bank, and we saw the atrocities, and we've seen what's happening. And so there's nothing you can say to justify these things. And then I get them at the university for about an hour on their way to East Jerusalem and have to convince them that the whole thing is not what it seems, and it's more complicated, and some things are fabricated, and you can't believe everything you hear. So it was very challenging. And when Stand With Us asked me to go to Cape Town, I remember the call. They called and they said, Emily, will you please go to the University of Cape Town and speak during Israel Apartheid Week? And I said, excuse me? Apartheid? South Africa? Not so sure I'm the candidate. In the end, I went. And when I got back, the question that everyone asked me, of course, was how was it? And I still haven't quite found the answer to describe what we went through that week. It's definitely not exciting. It's challenging, emotional, terrifying would be probably a good definition. Young Israelis go through a lot. And I'm only going to talk very briefly about specific events from that week to kind of bring it to your doorstep as well. The 3 of us had an incredible time at UCT from the second we stepped on that campus, convincing people that, 1, they weren't paid to come down. Many people asked me that. How much did you pay them to say that they were Israeli and come down here and say that to us? We faced vandalism. The tent that they were talking about, the Hamas charter that we had printed out to put up, was completely ripped to shreds. They refused to recognize that we would put that up. The first second I walked on campus, they said, you're a murderer, you're a rapist, you're not welcome here. I said, well, nice to meet you. And it continued, and the peak for me is when, unfortunately, it was a night that Metal and Rebecca were already involved in a different speaking event. Myself and the other 2 Stand With Us boys that were there, along with the kids from Saljis, the Jewish students, we went to the big event of the week, the big debate that the BDS and the PSF, the Palestinian Solidarity Foundation, were putting on. I expected to go to this event and see a panel of Palestinians speaking. That's what it was supposed to be. I walk in and I see 5 older, very extreme BDS and parliamentary supporters, and within 10 minutes, the first thing they said was, where are the white Zionists in the room? And I was thinking to myself, only if Metal and Rebecca were here? And so all of us white Zionists, without hesitating, raised our hands. And we knew exactly what that meant for us for the next couple hours. And we endured 2.5, 3 hours of absolute verbal terror and slaughter. And the fact that they directed their entire speech towards us, the cameras didn't leave us for a second, and they continued and continued on. Within 20 minutes, they had now come to the assumption that, as directed by one of the speakers who was a former member of parliament, said, the first thing South Africa needs to do is take stand against Israel and arrest any Mossad or Israeli intelligence members who enter South Africa. Arrest them for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Immediately, the entire PSF student body turned around and looked at me. I hadn't hidden my background in intelligence. And then I was thinking, oh boy. I spent the whole night with Jewish lawyers telling me what they could do, what they couldn't do. If they arrested me, what did that mean? And so, me and Jonathan can start a support group over here on threats of arrest. And it shocked me because that was the peak for me. That was the point where when people ask me, well, why would they say that? The simple answer is because they can. Because they can. Because no one's stopping them. Because nobody came and said, hey, you guys are crossing the line. And if anything describes that week, it was crossing the line. The amount of hate, the death speech, it's not even hate speech anymore, it's death speech, that came out of their mouths towards us was unacceptable. It was not academic in any means of the term. And what our goal was going down there, and with your help, we were able to actually go down there and show an academic side of this. To say, we're starting a dialogue, you can come to our tent, you can hear us, and we can talk. The other side of the plaza had quite a lot of noise going on. There was always some sort of a rally, and I hate you, and you hate me, and whatever was going on over there. And when all of the noise was going on, I actually realized that all the Israelis were actually still in our tent. And the man that Metal spoke about, you mentioned Abdallah? No, Rebecca. Abdallah from Nazareth. Eventually I said, come and have coffee with me. And he didn't know that I knew Arabic before we didn't know that he knew Hebrew. And so it was interesting for him to find out my background. And we sat down and I said, why are you doing this? I said, why are you letting them say all these things when you know that it's not true? He said, Emily, it's a different world down here. He said, you and I can't stop what's happening even if I wanted to. And I said, but you know that that's not true. You could have been on that panel and you could have said something. And he said, nor would I, nor could I. And what I want to emphasize to you guys tonight is actually what went on after I got back from Cape Town. Because when I got back, I said, this isn't going to pass with me. This is not acceptable. I went back to Stand With Us. I told them exactly what happened, what I felt about it. I went to Knesset members. I said, shame on you that this government isn't doing more for the people in South Africa, for the Jews in South Africa. They need that support. And as you can imagine, I got pretty cold-shouldered. And eventually I looked at them and I said, listen, I'm not here to tell you anymore. I'm telling you, you either help or get out of my way. Because this isn't going to continue. And what I've been up to for the past couple months after we got back, and what I feel honored to be able to say to these guys here, is that there was much more success that came from our trip to South Africa than we ever could have imagined, actually. And it starts with only the simple fact that the UCT campus also will be holding a vote on whether to even have this event again on campus because of the sheer violence and hatred that came up during this week. That's a huge thing that no campus has actually ever done before. Whether they decide to or not, it made a point. It made a point that our government doesn't always realize that we should be there, and we should be standing up, and we should be saying something, because if we weren't there, they would have said everything they said. They would have continued telling people that IDF soldiers go into the West Bank and give little Palestinian children poisonous candies to kill them off at a younger age. I sat there and I heard that and I said, you've got to be kidding me. No one's stopping them. But we were there to stop them. And when we were there to stop them, we also pushed their buttons. And the one thing about emotional BDS activists worldwide, and anyone who's spoken to them worldwide can contest, they will lose their patience. And they will be radical. And they will show their extreme side. And that's exactly what happened in Cape Town. And we might not have seen it then, but we see it now. Because that together with the work that we did there, specifically a radio show that Metal and I did together on CCFM radio, a 1.5-hour segment that they did on why we were there and what we represent, those things combined actually led to a very special event that happened in Israel last week that brought me to TbT and all of you guys, which was a special tour for a very senior priest in Cape Town, known all of South Africa actually. And he's a very, very influential person also in the religious world and also in politics. And he heard Metal and myself and all of the Israeli students in Cape Town And he also heard the BDS speakers, such as Miko Pered, if you could call him a fellow Israeli, I guess, saying all these radical things about Israel and fabricated things, stories of what we do. And he heard the extremism, and he heard the Israeli students stand up and ask him one question. His response was so extreme that even for this priest, who is a very known, active BDS supporter, said, wait a second. He called up some people who are familiar with me and what I do, and he said to him, listen, it's very possible that the BDS has maybe not told me the whole story. It's possible I don't know everything, and I feel as if I might be being used, myself and my position in the church. This is a huge thing for anyone to say, especially someone in such power who's been so public for the past couple of years on his stance against Israel. Immediately he said, is it possible that I can see Israel, and not the Israel that he saw 2 years ago with the BDS in Kairos? I immediately told my friend in South Africa, of course, and we organized the tour. TbT helped us, and Charles and Herzl and Dave all came down to meet with him during his tour. It was a tour that the goal, I'll put it this way, of what, where'd Dave go? Of what he was saying and what I've been doing is that we have the tools, we have the resources, we are not necessarily using them as efficiently as possible. We have all of these forces that are doing great things, but kind of like what also Dave said, our reach is limited in how far we can go. And even if every single pro-Israel person and organization, including the evangelicals, including all the Israelis and Jews came together, we're still very outnumbered. And it's about making the most of what we've got and to make it start working more efficiently. And when I asked Dave if he could send down some people to speak to this priest, it was because you're the legitimate people to be speaking to him. South Africans who experienced apartheid, who know apartheid, and they know how to tell him what's the difference is. Because, as Dave could probably tell you, we experienced all week with this man, everything is like South Africa. It's exactly the same. You can't compare. And it wasn't until he sat down with you guys that he understood that you can't compare. And he started understanding not only that he is wrong, but that he was literally sold stories. And in 9 days, we were able to really take a man who was publicly endorsing BDS activity, and in the end he went back to South Africa and he met with these people, these journalists and these BDS activists, and he said, you guys owe me a lot of answers. When they couldn't answer him, he said, bye-bye. And that I want to thank. So there are a lot of people to thank for that. TbT, all of the people who took part in that tour to help, and especially these guys, and all of the people who went down to UCT that aren't with us tonight, that did an amazing job all week, didn't sleep much, and spoke wherever they could spoke, and did whatever they could do to make that impact, and we did make that impact, and we're going to continue making that impact. And it will be done with everyone being able to work together, to coordinate, and to do the most we can with what we have together.